to today's virtual panel discussion that will point out the way for India and of course the world to become sustainable in the way we construct our real estate projects. It is well known that the building sector emits 39% of global CO2 emissions, of which 28% comes from the operation of buildings and 11% from building materials and construction. It is estimated that over the next 4 decades, building floor area is projected to grow by over 3 trillion square feet. To achieve the vision of a decarbonized world and equitable climate action, reducing the carbon footprint of buildings is a key to mitigating the impact of climate change. This is where building consultants come in. They are required to ensure that projects are executed smoothly and successfully and on time. Green building consultants must aid the project team to build features that benefit the final occupants of the building. One point that cannot be put aside, all this must be done with minimum cost escalation. A building consultant must be technically sound in most areas of construction and operations, and most often than not, even more than the architect. He must have sound knowledge of MEP and is required to provide his stamp of approval in almost all areas of design and planning. Construction Week, along with IFC, a World Bank group, will explore how consultants have advanced over the years in offering solutions and suggestions so that the end product is truly a green building in the real sense. Coming to today's virtual panel discussion, Building Consultants Staying Relevant to the Decarbonization Revolution, we have a highly experienced and intellectual panel who are well versed in green buildings. We have Deepa Satyaram, Lead Fellow, IGBC Fellow, USGBC and WELL Faculty, Executive Director, EN3 Sustainability Solutions, is an international sustainability, HVAC and wellness design professional. She has been named as one of India's top 50 nature's keepers for spearheading India's green building movement and propagating sustainability in the built environment. She serves on the Sustainability Infrastructure Advisory Board of the ZOFNAS program at Harvard University. Deepa founded EN3 in 2003 to specialize in sustainability and energy efficiency consulting. Since then, EN3 has been consulting for over 500 million square feet of green and well buildings worldwide, with operations in the US, India, the Middle East, and Africa. We have Gurneet Singh, Director, EDS, who's qualified as an architect at Chandigarh College of Architecture, Punjab University in 2002. After that, he attained his Master of Technology in IT in Building Science from International University of Information Technology, Hyderabad. He has developed his proficiency in various modeling and simulation tools such as Visual Do, Energy Plus, Radiance, AutoCAD, Revit, 3D Max. His specialties include computer simulation of buildings with a focus on the following aspects of buildings: energy simulation and analysis, lighting and daylighting simulation and analysis. We have Mars Dixit, Team Lead, ECBC Cell Gujarat, who is an architect and a building energy analyst with 6 years of experience in the field of architecture, building energy efficiency research and consultancy. She is currently working at Gujarat Energy Development Agency as a consultant architect and also a specialist consultant for a global building performance network. She is also the founder partner of the energy consultancy firm Neve Energy and Sustainable Solutions at Ahmedabad. Samir Sinha, founder and MD Savvy Group, who began his professional career in Chicago, working on multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects between 1992 and 1996. He returned to India to establish Savvy Infrastructures along with 2 college classmates. Samir is passionate about sustainability and technology. Under his leadership, Savvy is today the leader in green building development in Gujarat. He spearheads the green building movement in Gujarat. His team is committed to achieving the UN Sustainability Development Goals for India. And lastly, our moderator for today is Atif Said, South Asia Lead Green Buildings, EDGE Green Building Market Transformation Program, Climate Business Department, IFC. He leads the South Asia Green Building Program for IFC, which is International Finance Corporation, which aims to mainstream construction of resource-efficient buildings through targeted investments, setting up market standards and government policies. Atif has supported mandatory green building codes for 7 national and local governments. A trained architect and building sustainability expert, Atif has worked with Johnson Controls in USA as an energy program manager. Over to you, Atif.
Thanks, Jayashree. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can.
So welcome to all the panelists and all the audience members, all the attendees to the event today. I think what we're going to talk about is kind of a buzzword now in some ways, but there are a lot of myths surrounding this buzzword of decarbonization that we're trying to to break today and over a period of time. So let me present my screen here, and I will share a few slides, and then we'll open it to questions for the panel. In a way, regular building consulting is like a test match, a cricket test match. It's long, it's kind of predictable, and usually, in many cases, there is no sense of urgency. Urgency not in delivering results, urgency in innovation. There is one set pattern. We keep doing the same thing over and over again with some tweaks depending on what the client wants, but it's a predictable kind of a service that consultants have been providing for many, many years. But now there is actually a different game that's happening. So it's like moving from test cricket to a T20. There is a very different kind of circumstances around us. The sense of urgency has drastically changed. And that's because buildings have been proven to be one of the catalyst or one of the defining aspects of climate change, one of the key reasons behind climate change, but also one of the most cost-effective solutions behind climate change. And as some of you who may have been following the news that has been coming out of the research circles, the IPCC report that just came out last month has kind of shown a light on the emergency. The 1 degree target seems to be no longer feasible anymore. 1.5 degree, that too may be hard, but it is still within grasp if we act fast and fast enough. And earlier we used to be talking about 20, 30 years life cycle that we have to kind of tackle this demon that is been unleashed by us only. But now it's a much shorter timeline that we have. If we don't act now, in the next 5 years, if not change the way we've been building and operating our buildings, we're probably not going to make a huge impact after that, a positive impact. So there is a very strong sense of urgency. And as consultants, we have to keep up with the game. Otherwise we'll become irrelevant. So that's the topic we're going to talk about. How do we act? How do we change the way we've been working? What kind of new skills, new messaging, new attitude that we need to bring to the game? And there are obviously challenges on our path. And how do we overcome those challenges? So our esteemed panelists will bring in and share their experiences on what they've done so far, what they're planning to do, and what is the kind of feedback and messaging that they're getting from their clients. That's extremely important because that's what's driving the whole market. This is kind of I found the statement quite useful. This is from a principal of one of the leading architecture firms in the US. And the question asked to her was, architects really care about climate change? And the answer is yes, most of them do. If you talk to them, they will definitely say, yes, this is a strong, urgent need for us to do something about. But what to do is the mystery. What is the actual practical step that we need to take as consultants, as architects, as engineers to really bring about the change? There is a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding in some cases about that. Some people say, okay, just planting a huge number of trees is going to solve the problem. Some say planting a lot of or putting a lot of solar panels is going to solve the problem. Some say just going to the smart technologies, AI, and a lot of sensors might solve the problem. Some may say, no, we need to go back to the vernacular and just use that. What is the right answer? Is it a mix of all of these? Is there a right balance? Does it change from place to place or building to building? Those are some of the questions that maybe we'll try to explore today. Let's step back a little bit and see, let's look at buildings. Buildings use energy and other resources as well, but they also produce, or they have the potential to produce, some resources as well. So you can say there is an output and there is also a potential input that the buildings can have. And those could be, if the output is greater than the input, meaning you're consuming a lot more energy than you're producing, then it is a conventional building. There is a possibility to change it, but right now it's a conventional building. If the output is equal to the input, meaning you're consuming as much energy as you're generating, then you're at net zero. And if your input is greater than the output, then you're net positive. So that means you're now actually selling electricity or giving away electricity to somebody else to use. So you're doing a positive contribution here. And the resources we're talking about here, primarily it's energy that's talked about, and it could again be a site energy or source energy. Source energy meaning the energy that's being produced at the power station, at the source of the production. And there are obviously those transmission losses that happen along the way. So those can be included in this balancing equation as well. There could be another way to look at this is with cost. Are we producing as the cost of electricity that we're producing? Is it same to the cost of electricity that we are buying or we're consuming? Because sometimes there is a difference. And the same kind of equation could be like that. Water as well. But increasingly, we're seeing carbon being looked at. And this is a relatively new phenomena, only within the last 5 years or so that we've really started to see carbon come upfront as one of the key metrics. So depending on which metric we're looking at, it could be a net zero energy building, a net zero water building, or a net zero carbon building. So net in the sense that it is not really a zero, there is still carbon being produced. In fact, every building that's built, we are replacing nature in some way. So there is an impact. But are we able to compensate for that impact through other means? That's why the term net is important there. But colloquially speaking, now everybody just says zero carbon or zero energy. Practically, it means the same thing. So what we're seeing now is net zero carbon is becoming more and more common. But you could find that people talk about net zero or nearly zero energy building. And this is a term that many government agencies, including Bureau of Energy Efficiency, is also adopting. Nearly zero energy building as kind of a stepping stone towards net zero, meaning the way Bureau of Energy Efficiency classifies is a building that is consuming 15 kilowatt hours per square meter per year or less is a nearly zero energy building. And then a net zero energy would be a net zero impact. Then we have the net zero carbon building. And then potentially in the future, we could even have a net zero carbon building that looks at not just the operational energy, but also the embodied carbon. Embodied carbon meaning the amount of energy and carbon used to manufacture, extract, and transport the construction materials onto the site. So that requires a whole new level of calculations and analysis. And we are getting there, but right now, it is still going to take a few more years before that starts to be counted for many projects. But right now, zero carbon has become fairly commonly understood and relevant around the world. And several institutes, including our own IFC, World Bank Group, and World Resources Institute, the World Green Building Council, etc., have adopted this standard and are working towards supporting that in their own. IFC, my institution, part of the World Bank Group, we are also part of this initiative called Zero Carbon Buildings for All, which is endorsed by the UN. And we are keen to supporting in different ways, including investments, including technical advisory support, and also supporting on the policy side wherever feasible. So trying to bring in government policies, regulations, and possibly incentives as well in that regard. So to summarize on what really a zero carbon building is, our understanding or our currently used definition is that a zero carbon building is one that is firstly highly energy efficient. So that's the first step. You have to reduce the use of energy, the demand for energy first. And then after you make it highly energy efficient, then produce on-site or get carbon-free renewable energy to meet the remaining energy needs of the building, so that your equation is balanced out. So need for energy is equal to the amount of renewable energy provided. So that, in our understanding, is the simplest definition of a zero carbon building. Now, globally, the community has been moving towards zero carbon building at COP21, it was agreed upon by several nations that the target we need to set for ourselves is that by 2030, all new buildings have to be zero carbon, meaning every new building that is built beyond 2030 should meet the zero carbon standards. And by 2050, all existing buildings also should be zero carbon. Now, existing buildings require a lot more effort in some cases because the design has already been built. So converting them takes more effort and sometimes more cost. So that's why the target for that has been pushed a little further. But setting those targets doesn't mean that we can relax for now. We have to start acting on it because this is a huge task. There is a lot to be done. And if we do it in a phased manner, then it is practical. But if we arrive at 2030 or 2029 and we realize that we haven't done anything or what we've done is only like 2% of the market, then it would become like an impenetrable, like a hurdle just too high for us to cross at that time. So the struggle, the efforts have to start now. I'll show a short video, kind of summarizes this, and I hope you can all hear the voice as well.
The world is currently experiencing the most significant urban population growth in human history. More than half of the global population is currently living in urban areas. Regions such as Latin America and the Caribbean have a high rate of urbanization, with 81% of their population living in cities. Because of this, floor area in buildings is expected to grow by 65% in this region, adding almost 11 billion square meters in residential buildings by 2050. Taking into consideration that buildings and construction generate nearly 40% of annual global greenhouse gas emissions, reducing their energy demand is vital to tackling climate change. In fact, all buildings must be zero carbon by 2050 in order to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. Unfortunately, fewer than 1% of buildings in the world are zero carbon today. A zero-carbon building is a highly energy-efficient building that is fully powered from on-site or off-site renewable energy sources, or offsets. Zero-carbon buildings are good for the environment and good for business. According to the IFC, green buildings represent an over $24 trillion investment opportunity across all emerging market cities. They are also a good value, since they can be cheaper to cool, heat, and manage, and offer fewer operating costs for owners and tenants. IFC's EDGE certifies as green new and existing buildings that cut at least 20% in energy, water, and embodied energy and materials, certifying over $1 billion worth of floor space each month. EDGE Advanced certifies buildings that have reached 40% or more in energy efficiency, providing a clear path to achieving zero carbon certification. There is no time to wait. The planet needs more zero-carbon buildings today, and EDGE is here to help. Do you want to discover a practical path to zero carbon? Do you want to help transform the real estate sector in your country? Contact us at edge@ifc.org.
So when we talk about zero carbon, often this kind of an image comes to our mind, that these are the kind of buildings, very out of the ordinary, huge investments. They look and feel very different. But that's not necessarily the case. You might have these buildings as well. This building is in Hong Kong, one of the demonstration cities buildings over there. You can have buildings like these as well, which may not look extraordinary from the outside, but they're all net zero energy buildings in this case. And I'll show a couple of more examples, some recent examples that we've worked on the EDGE certification side. This is a very recent building that's just been certified called Stallion Labs. This is in Ahmedabad, and it's a pharmaceutical company. And right from the beginning, the intent of the owners was to go as sustainable as possible. So they looked at the kind of the extreme possibilities, but still arrived at something that did not really cost them too much. They were able to cut down on their energy use by more than 40%. And now all the remaining energy needs are being met by the solar panels that are installed on the site itself. So they're not reliant on external renewable energy at all. And right now they're in that 1-year phase when they have to document that data, and they are expected to receive their zero carbon certification very soon this year. This is a building for a bank in Bulgaria. This bank is supporting a lot of green finance, green buildings, and other green climate projects. And they wanted to walk the talk. They wanted to make sure that they are demonstrating what they are supporting and they are encouraging others to do. So they have installed, again, fairly energy efficient systems in the building and achieved 50% savings on site. And the remaining is the remaining energy need is through renewables. In both these examples, in fact, most of the net zero energy buildings or net zero carbon buildings that you see, this is the kind of hierarchy that we've seen work, which reduces their cost as well. So the first line of attack we suggest should be on how to reduce the demand for energy through passive design measures, through optimizing your windows, orienting the building right, making sure you get the solar heat and light in when you really want it, but you block it when you don't. And this is the lowest cost, the cheapest way to reduce your energy. Then once you've done that, you've optimized the building envelope. Now supplying whatever energy is needed through the most efficient systems that the building can afford. The most efficient cooling system, lighting system, electrical, operational electrical and other systems that are installed in the building. And then once you've done that, then supplying those systems with green renewable energy on site if possible. And the very last resort, which is kind of the last option that we suggest, is carbon offsets. Carbon offsets literally means that you are not able to cut down on your carbon emissions, but somebody else is. So you buy those credits from that person. You buy the rights to claim carbon savings from that person, maybe planting a huge forest, or who may be running a whole renewable energy plant, or who may be doing some other kind of activity that's reducing carbon. And through a kind of an organized manner, there is a whole organized carbon market out there. You can actually access those credits and use it for your own. But again, this is not the first line of attack. This is the very last resort. And there is a possibility in the next few years that this may not be allowed very easily. There might be insistence that every project should cut their own carbon emissions. For industries, maybe it still might be possible because industries have a huge amount of operational energy, but typically buildings don't have that much. And we have proven ways to reduce carbon on the site itself. So we at IFC are providing a lot of support through policy, through working with governments, through investments. We have done close to a $1 billion investment in green buildings in India. We are doing awareness activities, trying to present the business case especially to the financial sector, to the banks, to the investors, and also to developers and building as well. And we've also launched educational courses for professionals, consultants, both in the university and young professionals, on the business case of green building. The Edge software, very briefly, is a free online software that we have developed. Anybody could access it at edgebuildings.com. And the standard that we've set is a 20% reduction in resource consumption. And once that is proven and audited, then a verified green label is issued to them, which is recognized by most international climate finance agencies. So that opens a pathway to green finance, climate finance, and a lot of that is now available for green projects globally. So that 20% that I talked about relates to 20% reduction in energy consumption in the building, basically your electricity bill. If you can cut it down by 20%, your water consumption, if you can cut it down by 20%, and material, we're looking at embodied energy of the construction material. So again, the energy used to extract, manufacture, and transport material. If we can cut it down by 20%, then this project would be eligible for an EDGE certification, which is the minimum standard of EDGE that we have set. And this is all compared against a local benchmark, a local baseline. So if you're building an office building in Hyderabad, the baseline would be typical office buildings in Hyderabad. If you're building a hospital in Shimla, then it would be how hospitals in the Shimla region are typically being built. So the basic standard is the EDGE certified, which is 20-20-20. But if you go beyond that and you meet at least 40% energy saving, then you get an EDGE advanced standard. And that is a prerequisite or a minimum requirement to go for zero carbon. Zero carbon is an operational certificate, which is issued to projects Once they've achieved an edge advanced, that is 40% energy saving, then subsequently they have to document the energy consumed in the building and the renewable energy that is generated on site or procured from off site. And if they have to do this on an yearly basis, submit this document, and the zero carbon certificate is based on that actual operational data. And this is renewed every 2 years. The process is fairly straightforward. You do the assessment in the Edge software, get the Edge Advanced certificate, monitor your building for at least 1 year, and then get renewable energy or carbon offsets if you have to. It is available for all building types, whether they are new or existing. And we are also working on some large portfolios. So this decarbonization is being attempted at the entire portfolio level, not just a single building level. And there are numerous benefits of doing that. So the website is at edgebuildings.com. Feel free to explore. And if you have any questions, the website is completely free. You just have to register once. And then if you have any questions, feel free to contact us and we'll be glad to kind of guide you and support you on understanding the software. The certificate looks like this. This is the regular Edge certificate, but if you go for a zero carbon, you can actually get a separate zero carbon certificate as well, which gives all the details on the actual performance of the building. The process is straightforward. You register using our website, and then you submit all the documents once you've met the minimum standard of Edge Advanced. Submit all the documents onto the website. An independent auditor reviews those documents, and a preliminary certificate is issued. And once the building is completed, the auditor comes back in, goes through the building site, documents all the relevant measures, if they are in place or not, and the final certificate is issued. And then the 1 year period of actual monitoring starts. After the end of that 1 year period, the utility data is submitted, that is reviewed, and then the zero carbon certificate is issued. As I said, our standard is very closely aligned with most of the climate finance standards, so that if a project is looking for climate finance, which often comes at better terms, then Edge would become one of the ways to facilitate that. We'll start with the panel discussion. Now, as you've heard, we have an esteemed panel here with a lot of experience and varied kind of experience. We have people who are independently practicing green building consulting and architecture practice. Then we have people who have very close tie-ups with developers, with industry associations, and then we have people who are teaching as well. Let me start first by asking Deepa, and then Samir also, if you could answer the same question. Do you think it is practical and feasible to build zero carbon buildings in India now at this time?
Thanks, Atif. Good afternoon to all. To give you a short answer, Atif, yes, it is possible. But the longer answer to that is, one of the things that we really have to take a serious look at is the way we design and build buildings itself. We cannot take our business as usual approach and take green or zero carbon as an add-on and then try to get to zero carbon. It won't work, because time and again we've seen that there are many things that need to be planned way ahead in order to kind of chart a path for zero carbon. I think that one of the key things that will change this whole landscape for zero carbon buildings is the way we actually start looking at our building designs itself. We have to relook completely at the way we design buildings, not so much just again making small changes or tweaks, but at a complete different approach to design and construction. I keep telling my team about the concept of 3Ds that we tell all our clients. Decarbonization is the first D, obviously, that's the heart of the discussion today. But there's also two other important Ds, which is dematerialization and deconstruction. Now, these are all interconnected because I think that when we start looking at zero carbon and when we start looking at creating zero carbon buildings, it's very important not just at looking at the way we build it or design it, but the kind of materials we want to use in it. Even designing buildings in a way that they can actually be dismantled and reconstructed or deconstructed and reconstructed, because we have to completely look at designs in a different manner. So the short answer, yes, it's possible. The long answer is we have a long way to go. And but the challenging or the interesting part is in India, we are poised at a very right position. We have a lot of design talent and we have a lot of knowledge base here in the country. And I think it's just tapping into the right knowledge base in order to relook at the way we do design and construction of buildings.
Thanks, Deepa. Samir, would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Atif. That was a very enlightening introduction. The question is a tough one. And obviously the answer is yes, that it is possible. It is also practical, definitely feasible. Are there challenges? Of course, there are challenges. And I feel challenges in India are probably tougher and larger than some of the other countries. But at the same time, we are the ones who have to do this because we are the few countries in the world that are part of the big problem that we're creating. Even though the consumers could be other countries, but we are the producers. And so the onus is on us to solve this problem. The problem is of commitment, which I feel is already there amongst the developers, amongst the private enterprise. But most importantly, the commitment is there at the policy level, at the government level. I think the Indian government has been the most progressive of all the carbon producing nations in the world. And we have committed to this in a way that we have never done before. So the policy commitment from the Prime Minister down has been extremely encouraging. And it's a great future for all of us consultants, people who are committed to doing this. So I feel that one big challenge is already resolved. Because we will need a lot of city level intervention. We will need a lot of larger district level intervention. If we really have to look at the key, like Deepa said, is the way we consume energy. We have to change the pattern of the way we are consuming energy, and we have a very piecemeal approach to our solving our energy problems. And then, simple things like what is the solution to having this DG power backup that we have in our buildings? Can we continue doing that, burning diesel to rely on backing up our fuel, energy demands? Can there not be? And we have, I think, before we began, Jayeshi was mentioning Gift City. It's such a wonderful solution we have there. We are consulting with Gift City. We are making buildings in Gift City. There's a district cooling system available with 100% power backup that supplies chilled water to every building within that almost a micro city. And that is 30% cheaper. It takes care of all the air conditioning problems. It's so much more environment friendly that our water is recycled from the sewage treatment plant. We do not use, it's all green. That city is certified green. And those are the kind of intervention that we need. And India, fortunately, is building as many new buildings, or actually much more. We are going to be the largest developers in the world over the next 20, 30 years, because we will still be building more than any other nation in the world. And if that is going to happen, then there's a lot of scope for building good, new, carbon neutral, carbon zero, whatever we want to qualify it as, buildings in the future. And so the last point I want to make is that, like I said, the pattern of consumption of energy has to change. The challenge, I feel, is not the money. The challenge is time. How soon can we do this? When can we have the technological innovation that will solve these problems for us? Because it is not about only emitting less. It's also about, like we were discussing earlier, it's about the negative emission. If we really want to go carbon neutral, how do we control the negative emissions? And so that is where technology will have to come in, and we'll have to solve that problem with innovation and technology. And I'm sure we will touch this in the future, but definitely doable. There's no option. There's no coming back on this road. The country is committed to it. The world is committed to it. So I don't think we can even debate whether it's doable. The only option is to do it, and it can be done.
Great. Thanks, Samir. Deepa, I think what I heard is that, yes, it is challenging, but doable. But that doesn't mean that we wait for things to happen by themselves. As Samir pointed out, policy level changes are happening, finance is being made available, technologies are coming up. So I think a lot of this is already happening. We just need to keep building on top of it. So every new building that we build should be much better than the previous one that we had helped build, so that eventually by 2030 at least, or even earlier if possible, we are able to get to the targets that we want. I would like to move to the next question, and Gurneet, for you, and then Maz, if you could take the same question as well. And others also, please feel free to jump in if you have any strong opinion on any of the questions. Do you feel is there enough awareness amongst building owners, building developers, investors about the need to reduce carbon in our buildings? And if there is interest, are you seeing that as demand from your investors, from your clients?
Yeah, thank you, Atif. Yes, in terms of awareness, our clients have started talking about carbon neutrality, and I would like to, give the full credit to the COP 21, where India has given that commitment at a policy level, and big corporates they are now talking about and have also set an internal target for their organization. So many of them have given us or are working with us to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And many have also set a target 2030 as a target. There is definitely now an awareness in terms of that, yes, they have to achieve this target. They have to move towards carbon neutrality. And as we all know that, as you have, Jayashree also highlighted that, buildings is a major contributor towards carbon emission. So whether it's factory, whether it's their office space, or they're building new assets, whether it's residential homes. So as an individual, we stay in buildings, and building are the major carbon emitter, right? So from that perspective, yes, they are now looking into how to achieve carbon neutrality, how to go towards zero carbon buildings. But I think one of the roadblocks is they are still not clear on how to achieve. So the first thing that comes to their mind is, okay, we have to achieve carbon neutrality, then they have to install solar, or they have to invest in green power. Right. So as you have in your presentation said that, the definition for zero carbon building is an energy efficient. The first word is to have an energy efficient building. But somehow I feel that the clients are not talking about that energy efficient building. They are only talking about how to offset there. So I really feel that though awareness is there, but it's still a lot of we need to educate them on that aspect, that the first task or the primary task is to bring in efficiency into their existing buildings or their new projects, and then opt for look into offsetting it with on-site or off-site methods.
Us?
Yeah, Atif. Thank you for the question. Good afternoon to all. And I mean, my perspective is a little different. I feel that there are two different groups in the industry right now. One is who is educated about energy efficient building and who want to take the next step, as Puneet sir rightly said, that they want to go for carbon, net zero carbon buildings. So they already know about what net zero carbon is. And then there is another group who really is not aware about what the entire idea of zero carbon is. So there are two different groups that we are dealing with. The first one, which knows about carbon offset, is say about 20-30%. I might be wrong, but they are a very small group of people who really want to make an impact. And then there is another group who wants to make an impact, but they don't have that amount of access to knowledge or access to consultants who can help them do this. So we can say small scale developers who want to build green buildings, they go for these rating systems, and they have this thing in mind where they want to design an energy efficient building. But as consultants, I think it's our responsibility to educate them about this, what is net zero carbon, why they need to do it. Because I mean, the market right now, as from what I understand, is people want to learn why they are doing certain things. It's not just like certificate लाने के लिए नहीं लाना है. They want to understand what is the impact that they are going to have on the environment. So as consultants, if we give them this extra information, I think definitely they'll go towards it. But it's really on us. It's on us that we help them reach that level, because they've already reached a level where they understand all the green building rating systems, all the norms that are required to make your building green or make your building efficient. But to take to that next level, it's on us. I think that there is still a lack in the market now, like consultant और जो developer है उसके बीच में, and we need to bridge that gap, because as consultants we know what impact it will have. So that's my take on this question. Yeah.
Thanks, Maz and Gurneet. That kind of creates another question in my mind. As you asked, Maz, what is in it for them? So maybe this question is for all panelists. Wherever you're seeing the demand from building owners, investors, corporations, why do you think they're asking for that? Why do you think they are getting into decarbonization, low carbon or zero carbon buildings? Is it because of the brand recognition they will get out of it? Is it reduction in operational cost they're looking at? Is it to get incentives? Or is it to meet government regulations or internal targets that they've set? So what are the key drivers for your clients to go for low carbon buildings? Whoever wants to take it, please feel free to unmute. And
so I can, Atif, I can go if you want. From a developer's perspective, in the real estate segment, I can tell you that the two major drivers, one is the regulation. Because most of the GDCRs, most of the development rules in most cities and states across the country now require you to build a minimum. If you're getting an environmental clearance for a building, you are building a gold standard building, pretty much. Whether you get certified or don't get it certified, the bylaws now are progressive enough, which I think is a tremendous move forward that we have made over the years. That they require you to be meeting a minimum benchmark, which is really good. Beyond that, the second big factor that I have seen over the last few years, and this is a phenomenon only over the last probably 4 or 5 years, is the green funding. The money that is coming into the country, mainly the larger projects that are being funded by multinational funds, by sovereign funds, by any kind of consortium of international financing institutions that is coming into the country, is mandating green. So that green money is the big driver, which will generate this demand in the country. And most of the people who are approaching us, large projects, whether it is logistic parks, whether it is warehousing, whether it is large city developments, they are all mandating it in their conditions of lending money, that it be green. And so that is the one big driver. So policy and money are the two major drivers that I can see, especially in the real estate sector. And the third factor is definitely branding. And it is not just branding. I think it is a commitment to the environment, which the developers are making, whether it is it's not so much demand driven, but almost a top-down kind of approach that a lot of developers now have. Because if you look at any annual report that a company puts out today, the first few pages are occupied by their commitment to the environment, by the commitment to what they are willing to do for the next generation. So people, the perception of the valuation of the company now depends on their responsibility towards the environment, and not just on the balance sheet, which now occupies the last few pages of the annual report. So I think these three factors will govern, and that is why I am very hopeful that the future for green development is very bright, especially in India.
Yeah, and just to add on, probably a fourth factor would be also a good portion of the tenants drive this demand. especially in the commercial market sector. So we've seen, I think, time and again in the green building movement in India since the early 2000s, when the end users ask for it, then a lot of developers have aligned and ensured that their buildings meet those requirements. So to a large extent, I think the two drivers we see are investors who are insisting on some of these mandatory statutory requirements to be met, and end users who want their buildings to meet these requirements as well. So it's a sort of so much so it's more of a stick rather than a carrot approach. There are less carrots or incentives yet in this market, but I think that it's rightly so. A lot of regulation and a lot of investor and customer requirements are pushing this, and will continue to push. I think that's the way it's going to go. Incentives will eventually come up, as we've seen time and again with government policies. Eventually, when we started the green movement, to when the first additional FAR policies came in place, there was a time lag. So the carrots will eventually follow. So right now it's more of a stick approach that's pushing either sustainability or even the zero carbon adoption across India.
Thanks, Deepa. Any other thoughts?
Yes. So another thing that I have observed is, which has actually pushed bigger organization towards zero carbon buildings, or getting into sustainability, as Samir has said, that there is green funding available in their annual sustainability report or annual report. There is a section on sustainability. So I strongly believe this ESG, environment social governance aspect, where the organization have to now voluntarily disclose the environment, social and governance aspect. Earlier, they used to only disclose their financial numbers. Now with this coming, SEBI also pushing for giving details, so they have to submit their building sustainability reporting in certain format. The benefit of this ESG disclosure or GRESP thing or any other disclosure framework is that they are not only talking about building, they are actually also talking about the whole supply chain, different stakeholders involved. So in that process, what I have seen in one of the projects is that the developer is also looking into or helping the supply chain system in their organization, and to see how they can be upgraded to also reduce the scope 3 emissions related to thing. So yes, for new buildings, the policy, green funding, branding, tenants, and also this disclosure thing, from my perspective, I see that yes, it has given a great push for all the developers, especially the existing buildings, because the policy, funding, branding, they are primarily looking into new construction or upcoming buildings. For the existing buildings, their disclosure in terms of what quantum of electricity they are using, how much water they are using, how much waste they are using. So when they are disclosing these numbers, this is also driving them to look year and year how to improve these numbers.
I'd just like to add one thing, that my experience is that when a developer gets into energy efficiency or zero carbon buildings, then they see the trend that even normally if they build the buildings, they are achieving a certain standard, and then they don't want to step down on that. So they are like कि अगर ये कर ही रहे तो अभी सारे projects के लिए हम लोग zero carbon ही करेंगे. So that is a tendency of all the developers, that once they started, they won't stop. So I'm just reiterating myself that it's our responsibility to just like show them the way, to handhold that to that destination, and I think then things will follow. Then, yeah.
That's a very interesting thought, Maz. Once they start, they won't stop. And I hope and wish that's the case with most major developers in India. But is there a danger of this becoming just another trend and getting a lot of greenwashing? So people proclaim that maybe they put in their ESG reports, they're doing it, but at the end, if you look at the actual performance of the buildings, they're not performing as well. And it's just getting them recognition, but not the other benefits that green buildings or zero carbon buildings are supposed to provide. How can we as consultants ensure that greenwashing is not happening?
I mean, I think, sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead, Ma.
Yeah. So I think one major difference between energy efficiency and zero carbon buildings is operations. Because you're going to look at the entire cycle of the building, how the building is going to be operated for another 2-3 years, and then you'll like finally give them a certificate of whether or not they are zero carbon. So again, it'll be the consultant who will be checking this, the performance of the building, and brainwashing in this sense is, I don't think it's possible, because you are going to write down the actual numbers, be it of the consumption of the or the generation that's going on the site. So in this particular case, I think it's not possible. That's my view.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. It's like the famous saying that goes, "In God I trust, everybody else bring me data." So the good thing about this whole ESG or carbon cycle is, at the end of the day, you cannot fake it. You cannot create numbers and you cannot keep recreating them year on year on year. So you actually have, at some point, you're going to reach a point where you know what your consumption is, and you calculate your consumption for your year two, and you're going to realize that year two is more than year one. Somebody's going to step in and ask, hey, what are you doing? Why is it going up? And so this will bring in this whole ecosystem of people automatically. Once you start measuring and once you start reporting, it's out there. And when you do that year two, year three, year four, nobody wants to continue to report poor numbers. So it'll automatically create an ecosystem for action. And that action would obviously be with an effort to reduce your carbon, maybe not become zero, but at least keep reducing it and offsetting it till a point where you can actually get eventually to net zero. And I think that is where the whole consultant and the technical community can support, because a lot of challenges arise when clients, initially the challenge is to calculate and report. Once you get past that hurdle, now you know how to report. The next question is, how do I reduce? And this is where a lot of hand holding is required, because it's a constant thing. No two buildings, no two operations, no two businesses are the same. So it may not be the same solutions that apply across different campuses or different buildings. So you need support to help them identify what their main areas of emissions are, what can they do to reduce it, what improvements can be made. So it's a continuous process. It's not like a one time done deal. So that's the beauty of the whole carbon cycle, is it never stops. You have to keep doing it, and as you keep doing it and reporting it, you will be forced to also improve, and that only takes you from one step better each year.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, Jayshree and Maz, and kind of gives me hope, because in the past decade, we've seen the emergence of several rating systems, benchmarks, and certifications. Now I see some convergence, because zero carbon is very data driven, and it is an absolute number that we're looking at, which is a zero. So there is no kind of ambiguity about that number. So there might be different ways of getting there, but as long as we are all going towards that number of a zero, or even a positive there on that side, then I think there is a lot of hope that there will be less confusion, there will be more clarity, and more kind of combined efforts, collaborative efforts that we'll see going forward. Any other thoughts on?
I also had a similar experience when we're talking about greenwashing. As Deepa has said, that since they are disclosing their numbers publicly, it's like disclosing their financial numbers, so they check it. The higher management is also involved in whether they are reporting it properly or not. Similar thing we have observed now with these energy numbers, water numbers, and waste number. The senior management is involved and also checking and reviewing and making sure that we are not reporting any numbers. So they're also doubly checking that. So I think this publicly disclosing the numbers has really helped, and it has basically now the senior management is also involved in checking, and it also is aware that these numbers, and as Deepa said, year on year they will also question that why we are not improving on that. So that will definitely help move towards the zero carbon buildings.
One thought that comes to my mind, and Samir, maybe you can jump in as well, where we are talking about a lot of data. We're talking about numbers. And I'm an architect by training myself, and I know that most architects run away from numbers. There are very few who actually embrace them and use them to their benefit. Are the consultant, and when I say consultants, I'm not just talking about green building consultants or sustainability consultants, including all architects, all engineers who are in this field, who are supporting the client in developing the whole concept of a building and making it a reality. Are we equipped now to handle this kind of analysis? Are we training them? Are we providing our consultants the right knowledge? Or is there a need to kind of reboot the whole system and provide this lot of information and technical support that is needed to bring them up to par to be able to handle this kind of a new reality that we're looking at? And Samir, maybe I'll interrupt you, so please go ahead.
No issues. Yeah, to answer your question, we are far from equipped. We haven't even started scratching the surface. And just to the stark example is even the panel discussion that we're having today, we've only touched upon, I think if you're looking at the comments, everybody's talking about, we're talking about new buildings, we're talking about high performance buildings, we're talking about large corporates, we're talking about green funding coming into large developments. The country is full of existing buildings. The country is full of homes. The country is full of resident welfare societies who are sitting on tons of money, which actually can be used only for the development and enhancement of the existing buildings. But no consultant ever goes to them and says, okay, let me propose a solution for your building. If you do this, and this, it may not be a very lucrative exercise for the consultant, but the resident welfare society will end up saving 20%, 30%, 40% energy and water at the end of the year. I think that is one thing that we are still missing, and largely because, like I said, there's not enough profession, there's not enough training. Not enough designers, architects, consultants are looking at that because, like I said, it's not lucrative enough or they don't have the bandwidth. But that is truly the mass of this country and of the world. The new construction is only a small portion of it. So that is one area which I feel is one cardinal mistake that all consultants, the entire sustainability movement is ignoring so far. Is they're not targeting how will we resolve the existing, because the country will not become zero carbon if we only look at the new buildings. We will have still a large problem to resolve. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know what they can do about it. We are not even focusing in it, honestly speaking. But yes, no, we are not equipped yet. We'll have to go along with.
Anybody else on the skill gap or skill, if there is a gap at all?
I think skilling is an area that we are lagging behind in general in the country, especially with all aspects related to sustainable construction and even to some extent design. As we move towards a zero carbon approach, we are going to move out of a lot of high carbon intensive materials and manufacturing and construction to looking at low carbon, zero carbon building materials, products, technologies. So it's not just designer skilling, but it's also a lot of the workman skilling is going to be a big challenge, because you're going to have a whole bunch of people who've been trained in conventional cement and steel production, and suddenly you want them to move to low carbon hydrogen fuel cells and other kinds of technologies, which will require a huge focus in terms of skilling at every level. Technical skilling, yes, but that's probably we're slightly better at the technical level skilling than we are at the worker and the construction ground level skilling. So that's going to be a big area that we really need to look at, and we need to look at very quickly as a country. There are possible opportunities to work with National Skill Developmental Council and all of that, because you need to start setting up that ecosystem. You can't go there and then realize that we don't have the people that can take us there, and then say, okay, we need to go back and now we have to reskill and bring people up to speed. So that's going to be, I think, a big question that needs to be addressed, and addressed very quickly. It's again an industry government partnership approach you need to do. We need industries to step up, to start creating centers of training and skilling, and we also need government to provide the required ecosystem in terms of skill development, support, technology transfer. So it's going to be a very challenging. In fact, that's probably the toughest piece of the zero carbon puzzle that we need to figure out, because as much as we can do R&D, as much as we can do create new products, we can create low carbon designs. If we don't have the right people to implement it on the ground, it's going to push back our entire journey towards zero carbon.
Yeah, the great point, Deepa. And I am still surprised that in this day and age, we have hundreds of architecture and engineering colleges around the country that are not even teaching this subject. We may be teaching MEP, we may be talking about plumbing, electrical systems, etc., but we're not talking about sustainability, how to measure it, how to actually do the assessment, how to quantify these things, and how to provide that kind of support. It's missing from a very large portion of the young graduates that are coming out of colleges now. We are trying on our side. So we've started a course that called DFGE, Designing for Greater Efficiency, that we've introduced, a kind of a very simple 101 level course, but there's a lot that needs to be done on that front. And you're right about workers as well. One anecdote that I was in Jaipur yesterday, we are working with a bank there, which is providing green home loan to self-built housing. And one of the challenges was, how can we move to greener building materials? The contractor, we found out, that was quoting highly inflated prices for green materials to the home buyers, to the homeowners, just because they're not used to the material. So they'll say, I will not use if I am forced to not use the red brick and go to, let's say, an AC block, I will charge 5 times more for this. Even though the cost is the same, the process is not very different, but they're just not used to it. They say, I'll charge more. And that's one level of resistance. And I know that there have been several efforts in the past as well with green building centers and Laurie Baker centers to kind of train these things. Companies like ACC have set up these centers to train masons, but I feel we need to scale up that trend of skilling up as well. Any other comments on the skilling aspects? Anybody else?
Yeah, so I mean, I have had experience with, I've gone to universities, architecture universities in Gujarat at least, and climate is just a subject, like it's just a book that you need to read in your architecture course. And that should not be the case now. That's what I feel. It should have now there should be a change in curriculum where the emphasis should be more on energy conservation, passive house, like how to integrate all of these measures in designing. Because if you just put a studio, say green studio करके green पेड़ लगा देंगे तो उससे नहीं होने वाला है, because that's not the way like these designs work, or the students will be able to understand. So I think what Deepa ma'am said and what Samir sir said is absolutely right in terms of the industry side, but at the same time grassroots interventions are extremely essential, because the architects that are coming out, I am also an architect. Like I didn't learn all of this during my architecture course. It was a book for me as well, like just a climatology book. And then I learned all of this during my entire master's course, and then the experience that I built. So that intervention during those 5 years, I think will be very crucial and very helpful for like India as a whole. That's what I feel.
Yeah, good point, Maz. And another skill which I feel, besides the technical aspect, another skill which I personally feel that we should be inculcating in our architects and engineers in the college or even afterwards is how to communicate the message properly, how to convince, how to do the assessment. So many of us are strong in the technical aspect. We'll do a great job in evaluating different options for the design and doing a lot of data crunching, number crunching. But if we just put that 100-page report in front of the client without really explaining what is behind it, how do they benefit from it, and kind of taking out the key messages and presenting that properly in a language that they understand, we won't be able to make that change. So my next question is about that. Now, energy anyways was a little difficult sometimes with energy prices historically being low in India, but that's changing now. Carbon is even more abstract. Most people don't understand what is carbon. What are we talking about here? Carbon. So how do we communicate low carbon buildings, zero carbon buildings to our clients, to our end customers, when it is such an abstract concept? So any thoughts on the messaging, the communication, the pitch that we should be using to convince others to make the right decision about low carbon buildings?
So Atif, my experience has been, at least in Gujarat, that money talks. And anytime I can convince my client that you will save 5 rupees a square feet if you go for a sustainable building, it convinces him. And I've had that experience in several buildings. Obviously, commercial buildings are easier, high performance buildings are easier to convince clients. But then we have done that, and we will send out, whenever we send their air conditioning bill or their utility bills, we'll send a comparative graph saying this is what your utility bill would have been had you been in a conventional building versus what happens to you in a green building. So that is one aspect that we have to be able to convince. And life cycle analysis, I believe honestly that is the key which will essentially convince people to go for green. The other thing that I have really had a great experience is children. We have had camps that we've done in residential societies where we teach segregation of waste, how compost can be generated at the society level, how we can use that or take it back into small bags and give it to children to sell to the residents. We have worked with schools which have now got green building ratings. And so those are the impacts I feel which are tremendous, because explaining carbon neutrality to a common man is next to impossible. I struggle with it myself. So I don't know if that is something that we should really worry about. That can remain the domain of experts. I don't know if carbon neutrality is the concern of the common citizen. Their concern is does my quality of life get enhanced in a green building? Am I saving money in being in a virtue of a green building? Am I making an impact on the environment by making these decisions, which are actually profitable for me, which I'm not spending more money on? You were just mentioning red bricks versus fly ash bricks. Fly ash bricks, at least in and around Gujarat, in and around Ahmedabad, at least about 500-kilometer radius, is actually cheaper than red bricks. There's no question of it being expensive. It's 30% cheaper. So that is the kind of awareness that we need to create. And once that, and I can see that. I mean, today you see barely any buildings, at least in Ahmedabad, which now use red bricks. It's all fly ash bricks and blocks. Of course, it's easier because we have a coal-fired powerhouse nearby, so there is fly ash available. But again, besides that point, so I'm saying the awareness has to come, and we have to work, all of us as consultants, as promoters, as believers in sustainable development, have to work towards creating awareness amongst the common people, which will generate demand.
Thanks, Amir. Very eloquently said. And there are, as you said, there are numerous messages that we can pick out depending on the audience, I believe. Some may be more interested in quality of life if they're going to occupy the building, obviously. Some may be more interested in operational cost if they're going to pay for the operational expense. Some may be interested in the resiliency aspect of it. So if you build a greener building, in the long run, you may not have to retrofit the building to meet the expected policy changes, the regulatory changes that might be coming in. And if, let's say, a power shortage happens, your building probably will be able to survive it better than a non-efficient or non-green building. Samir, you wanted to say?
Just one more point I wanted to add, because you mentioned this. COVID has been a great advantage for sustainable development. I have had people come up to me and ask me about air quality index in our buildings. We put a huge sign outside in a display LED board which says this is the air quality index. Our infection rate is lower in the building. Our incidence of disease is lower. We have had fewer flu cases. We had fewer. Again, pandemic has created an awareness about community health, which never existed in our society earlier. People are concerned about the welfare of my neighbor, which was never something that we worried about earlier. So this pandemic has created and given us a great opportunity. So things like cleanliness, things like sanitation, things like air quality, things like water quality, is suddenly something that people are able to understand much better than they did before. So again,
Absolutely.
another great opportunity for us to take this forward.
Absolutely.
One thing that I'd like to add is an addition to getting clients approval is building their own confidence. So say, for example, if you're trying to market carbon neutral buildings or net zero buildings, we'll uh, we'll go to the clients and say that you're as it is using AAC block, or you're as it is using fly ash brick, so you'll be compliant to the to the green building norms or the net zero norms. So the client gains confidence. अच्छा मैं ये तो कर ही रहा हूँ, तो फिर let's just go a step ahead and do the next step. So building a confidence for the developer that you're already doing say 30% of the work and you just need to pave the next 70% of the path, and we'll help you do that, is crucial. So to build that confidence in the developer, I think is one other way to get more projects for this.
One promising change that I've seen in a few companies, and I probably think that's not a norm yet, is that previously, and I'm talking about architecture companies and developers with in-house design teams, typically they would not look at green aspects of a building unless the client really asks. But now I'm seeing it with a lot of companies that they've made this as part of their mainstream process. Every single project will go through a kind of a sustainability analysis. Maybe if they have energy modeling capabilities, they would get that done, daylighting, indoor air quality, etc. So it becomes part of their standard process that they have to do it, regardless, even if the client is not asking for it. And then they present this information to the client, which often may not be aware in the first instance that this kind of a thing would be valuable. But once presented in the right manner, I think again messaging plays an important role. I think most people with some kind of sensibilities would understand and be convinced about that. So I think the future is optimistic. The trend is in the right direction, but probably it just needs to be sped up a little bit. So we have a few more minutes, but in the last for the last question, I would ask all of you to take like maybe 1 minute to look forward in the next few years, let's say maybe 5-10 years now, and see what kind of main challenges you see in mainstreaming zero carbon in India. And if you are concerned about any specific aspects that need to be changed, that need to be prioritized, whether they are regarding regulations or policies or energy tariffs, or the way people are setting their targets, or whether it is about technology, what can really inhibit the increase or the adoption of zero carbon buildings in India? Conversely, you can talk about the positive, what can really speed it up as well. So 1 minute each, if you could, maybe we'll start with Maz. If you could just share your thoughts on that. Please try to stick to the time so that we have time for questions.
Yeah.
One positive thing that I have seen or that has pushed energy efficiency is the codes, the energy codes. So that is one thing that I feel is a positive thing, though it was voluntarily, and now many states are now in the process of making it mandatory, and there is now every upcoming project they are at least looking into compliance with the Energy Conservation Building Code, ECBC code. So that basically addresses the operational carbon part. Maybe we should have something similar for the embodied carbon if we are looking at the embodied carbon aspect, because there still the awareness is nil. So maybe we need to look into that part, and also look into some the renewable policies, limitations on sanction load, limitation on transformer capacity. So maybe we have to look into that compensation mechanism, so that each home or each facility is able to install and use the renewable energy to offset the carbon.
Great, thanks, Gurneet. Deepa, would you like to go next?
Sure, Atif. I think that the two biggest pluses for India for the zero carbon movement is concern and commitment. I think there is a lot of concern, genuine concern about wanting to do the right thing, both at the higher level as well as at the grassroots level. And commitment, like Samir was saying, right from the Prime Minister's office, a serious commitment in terms of genuinely addressing policies and measures to ensure zero carbon happens. The two big challenges I see are, I think, that the ecosystem for innovation, innovation in the sense of creating innovative low carbon made in India products, not again looking at low carbon products from China or the West all the time. So ecosystem for creating R&D, innovation, ecosystem including financing structures and support for startup to come up with low carbon technologies and low carbon materials. That's a bit of a challenge. We don't have that in place. And the other challenge, of course, like I talked about earlier, is the skilling, reskilling component, which is something, the challenges are quite, manageable. It's just that we need to acknowledge them and we need to put in place a plan to ensure that, we develop a complete system around setting up low carbon designs, technologies, and construction.
Samir, any thoughts from you?
So I think there are four challenges, which again I feel are the opportunities that we have. The one big challenge, again, net zero is an extremely ambitious word. It's a very extreme, it's gone viral. Everybody's talking about net zero, but I don't know if we really understand the gravity of what we're talking about. And net zero is an extremely complicated, extremely ambitious target that we have set for ourselves, which again is a great thing. But if we have to really achieve net zero, then it's not about just, like I said in the beginning, it's not about controlling or cutting emissions, it's also about reducing the existing emission, removal of greenhouse gases from the environment. That I feel, which is the negative emission, which I feel is our biggest challenge if we really have to do that. Cutting, we can probably control by the way we change our way we work. But that the removal of existing GHG will involve technology, will involve innovation, and that has to happen. So we have to create an environment where we can get those solutions. And those solutions, there are hundreds of solutions already happening, but most of them are either innovative, they're either gimmicky or probably if they are good, they're not applied to scale. So how are we going to achieve that? Those technological applications which can be applied to scale across the globe is going to be the biggest challenge. So because we today are generating about 40 billion tons of carbon, from that to go to removal of 1 billion tons of carbon every year is a big challenge. The second challenge that I see is the awareness, which I feel we are increasing that every day. It is happening. The fact that these kind of seminars are happening itself is a big step in that direction. But awareness is something that will help solve the problem, because the more people will get aware, the more demand we will generate for this, and then there will be more solutions. And the third and the biggest challenge I see globally is leadership, because none of this can happen at the home level only, or at the city, or at the district, or at the country level. It has to be tackled globally. And unless all of us are committed to this, unless all our leaders are aligned with this, having one country saying we will do this and others not aligning, we have seen what happened in the pandemic. Everybody has to work on it together. So leadership is going to be the biggest challenge, all said and done. If there are countries which are rogue and which do not cooperate, we will create more problems than we will solve. So I feel these are the four big opportunities as well as challenges that we have.
Thanks, Amir.
Yeah.
And finally, Maz.
Yeah, thank you for coming back to me. So I think firstly, the first step, as I said before, is educating. Not just the consultants, but also the coming generation that is going to enter into the building industry, the one that is going to be aligned with all the aspects, the entire design process is extremely essential. So first is education. Then, as Samir sir, Deepam and Guneet sir rightly said, awareness. So these kind of seminars should happen very frequently, because there are only a few bunch of people who understand this this topic, and there are a lot more that we need to cover in the next few years. So a lot more of this seminars is required. Then, as Gurneet sir rightly said, that policy level intervention. So we are talking about grassroots level intervention, but at the same time, top down approach is equally essential. Like ECBC and ENS are there, part of the rules now. ECBC rules is out, but something in the Energy Conservation Act that also includes carbon emissions, or like negating the carbon effect, would be effective. And lastly, the one that IFC is already doing is green financing. Like the developers or any stakeholder that is trying to go towards this step, like proper support should be given for them to implement these measures. So that's what I feel.
Great, thanks. And I think your point about education and awareness, I would just like to add that I feel sometimes we are often preaching to the choir, and the webinars sometimes are attracting only those people who are already interested in this. But we need to go out to a larger audience as well, involve associations like Architects Association and others, CREDI and those kind of developer associations, and whoever else is kind of feeding to the mainstream, and try to get this message across to them as well. One point that I would like to add here is, I think Deepa had mentioned earlier about numbers, that numbers can be very kind of good way of showing the performance of a building, that this is green because it's using so much carbon. So having a carbon scorecard for every building, which is displayed prominently and which is used in, let's say, every financial transaction that happens for a building, they have to show a carbon scorecard. It becomes like a mandatory document for selling a building, buying a building, renting a building, whatever, insuring a building. That would maybe create a big momentum for this as well. So thanks again. I think those were excellent thoughts, and I'm really quite enthused about all the ideas that you've highlighted, all the challenges that we're facing. So we have not really come up with all the solutions now, but at least we've identified those, and hopefully this will lead to further discussions to deep dive into some of those ideas that we can then try to mainstream and work on. So going back to my original cricket analogy, I think we've been batting second in a T20 game. We've been set a very high score to chase, 250 plus, and we're in the first power play. Thankfully, this is not the final power play. We're in the first power play, but if we don't hit it out of the park now, we cannot really do it in the final power play as well. So we need to start hitting and making those big successes and sixes now. So I'll close from my side, and then we'll turn it over to some questions. Maybe Jayashree, another 5 minutes for questions.
Yes. We have a very interesting question here. There's a growing popularity in the West for mass timber construction in the context of lowering embodied carbon in buildings. Do you think this can be brought to India as well?
So growing up and studying as an architect, initially there was always this message that I got was avoid use of timber in buildings because we're cutting down trees. So we have very few trees left, so don't do that. However, that thinking has now changed a little bit, especially in certain countries where they have sufficient trees available, sufficient forest available, especially in the West, in Canada and some European countries, and even in the US and all, that timber is a much more sustainable building material. Because it already has that carbon embedded in it. Yes, I would say it is a feasible thing, but only in places where this can be sustainably harvested, where wood timber can be sustainably harvested. That meaning whatever we're cutting, we're planting more than that, and we are keeping a track of that. Otherwise, it becomes like a steep, like a sliding slope where we just kind of cut down the trees and make buildings, and we are not left with, we're losing out on both fronts basically. So others, if feel free to please add.
The only thing I can add is I think materials are a very localized solution to the problems, and that is how they should be. You should use what is readily locally available if you want to create minimum carbon footprint to materials. We must use what is geographically convenient for us to use. And that is what you see across the country, especially in India, is local materials where there is available, what skill sets are available. That is what we have adapted. Brick becomes a much more conventionally acceptable solution to us. One, because it is, like I said, readily available, and also because labor is a huge factor in our ecosystem. Carpentry still is an acquired skill set, is a little more elaborate skill, needs tools, needs machines. So a little more automation is required. So I think there cannot be a simple solution applied to every problem. What works in the West may not necessarily work for us.
There's another question, I think is related more to commercial buildings. Industries are one of the major reasons for carbon emissions. What strategies can be followed to convince them to make their building green, both new and existing, with business-oriented benefits apart from key benefits of sustainable buildings?
Yeah, I think that industries as a group have very high carbon emissions. These are mostly process-related emissions, especially when you have intensive industries like cement and steel manufacturing. The buildings that are housing these industrial manufacturing activities can still go green, and many of them are continuing to go green, both the new and the existing buildings. But I think that more effort needs to be made to improve the process itself. The industry emissions sits larger in the emissions that come from the process. So there needs to be again more thought and more understanding of the way each of these processes are done and whether there can be a better way to do it. For example, I'll give you an example of Tata Steel. Tata Steel in their Netherlands plant has come up with a type of steel called Hisarna steel that has almost 70% less carbon emissions than conventional steel. In fact, they don't use the blast furnace anymore in the manufacturing of that type of steel. So there are ways that you can look at improving the process of manufacturing these materials itself so that the carbon emissions come down. The buildings that house these are, still treated like any other building, and you can apply all the sustainable and green building practices, both for new and existing buildings, to make them more green.
A last question. Do you think it's possible to have this drive in small tier or tier 2 or tier 3 cities or even rural areas?
It's not possible. I think that is the only way ahead.
Yeah, and also I think there are. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's possible, and I think sometimes it's easier to do it in smaller cities. That's what we've seen out of experience. It's usually the big metros and the large projects that have trouble implementing many of these low carbon solutions. The rural projects are more than happy and open to do it. It's only more awareness and more access to the right designs and materials. Once they have it, they can implement it.
So that's about it. Anybody has any?
Yeah, can I just maybe add one more thing
Sure.
here? I think I agree with what Samir and Deepa said, that yes, it makes a lot of sense and it is sometimes easy, but the approach probably needs to be a little different, because when we're talking to, let's say, tier 3 towns, and we're talking to developers, building owners, or even homeowners there, the messaging has to be different, because often in that instance, the key priority is better standards of living. If we're talking about a house, we're talking about a more resilient homes that can withstand issues that they might be facing otherwise. It might be related to the operational cost, that we are going to add a lot of money to run this building. And how do we go there? How do we reach that? Because it's rural by definition is more spread out. Urban is denser and easier to approach. So finding the right partners, like we are working with some housing finance companies now and trying to reach out to people who are building their own houses, which otherwise would be very hard to get to. But because they are already engaging with housing finance companies to get, let's say, a home loan, that is one channel that we can and push the green agenda, make them aware and convince them that they should build a better house, a greener house, and provide support to that. And we are seeing very positive results from that initiative. So yes, obviously it can be done.
And another thought that I had is the MNCs are taking up CSR activities, and within that, they can also take these rural areas and educate them. So I have a few friends who have been working in this domain and taking up villages or adopting villages and helping them understand these aspects. So that's also another way that this can be achieved.
So, okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much to, the panelists. It was a really enlightening panel discussion. Thank you to our dear audience who has stayed with us till the end of the discussion. So, I would just like to brief you and the audience about the Construction Week Awards, where we have a green award category, for residential and commercial. We have been using the Edge tool last year to evaluate, and of course, it's a very exhaustive way to judge this category. But yes, IFC has been supporting us, and we're going to start nominations soon for the Construction Week Awards. It's going to happen in September in Bombay, of course, and we're going to start nominations sometime in May, early May or mid-May. So look forward to coordinating with you all again for the category and the parameters, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.